And we are now back to the table in this second screenshot video for justification. And we're picking up in the upper right-hand corner of the table, when can deadly physical force be used in defense of persons? And we have the general rule that deadly physical force can be used in defense of a person or a third person when there is reason to believe that unlawful deadly physical force is being used against that person or a third person, and the use of deadly physical force is reasonably necessary. In New York State, we have something known as a duty to retreat rule when it comes to deadly physical force. And I think we need to be very careful and mindful about what this means. First of all, it only applies to the use of deadly physical force. So we're not talking about physical force. Secondly, it doesn't extend, the duty to retreat doesn't extend, or it's not in place if one is at home. So if a person is outside of his or her home and is confronted with unlawful deadly physical force, they nevertheless cannot use deadly physical force to defend themselves if there is, and we have to emphasize this, a completely safe avenue of retreat, a completely safe avenue of retreat. And I think when we ponder this for a bit, if all of the other factors are in play, meaning I have reason to believe that unlawful deadly physical force is being used against myself or a third person, or is just about to be used, I cannot use deadly physical force if I have a completely safe avenue of retreat. But I think that's going to be a very rare situation. For example, if the deadly physical force that's being threatened against me is with a firearm, well, there's no way there's a completely safe avenue of retreat because I cannot outrun a bullet. If a person is coming at me with a knife, I don't believe that I have a safe avenue of retreat available to me in almost all instances. So the only example I can give you where I think there would be a safe avenue of retreat would be if I were in my car, let's say, and I pull up to the curb, and the passenger side of the curb the passenger side of the car, I apologize, is facing the curb, and I roll down the window and a person comes up and they brandish a knife. Maybe, we're gang rivals. And that person brandishes the knife and says, I'm going to stick you. Well, arguably there I have a safe avenue of retreat because I just have to step on the gas and I can drive away. But again, I'm going to suggest to you that it's going to be a rare instance where I have a safe avenue of retreat. In those, there's a lot of states now that have simply eliminated the need to even consider a safe avenue of retreat, and they're summed up in the so-called stand your ground laws. We can then move into other categories where deadly physical force can be used. One would, in this next category, forcible rape or criminal sexual act, kidnapping or robbery. And here, it's a very unpleasant thing to think about, but let me mention it. In Buffalo, some time ago, there was he since was apprehended and is in prison, but there was a person, and he was known as the bike path rapist, which was kind of a misleading description because he was a bike path murderer. And apparently his MO would be he'd wait in a secluded spot on a bike path, and a woman, would be jogging by, and he would rush out and take her by surprise and knock her to the ground, overcome her, and at some point place a ligature around her neck and kill her. Well, if we put in slow motion what this person did, first thing he did is he knocked the person to the ground. Arguably, that's not deadly physical force. Nevertheless, since that person would have, seems to me, reason to believe that they're being targeted for a forcible rape, the law does not require that person to wait until deadly physical force is being used. Instead, when there's reason to believe that there's a forcible rape, then deadly physical force can be employed at that time to defend against the rape. And if you look at these crimes, forcible rape or criminal sexual act, kidnapping and robbery, the dynamics of all of these crimes are such that we know that the perpetrator, who may not begin to use deadly physical force, is engaged in a crime where deadly physical force can occur in a nanosecond. And what the legislature is telling us is that the victim or someone coming to the rescue of the victim doesn't need to wait until that perpetrator has actually started to use deadly physical force. Our next category is burglary of a dwelling or occupied building, and I spoke about that in the first screenshot video, but let's replay it a little bit. So you're upstairs in your home, if it's an upstairs, downstairs kind of a home. You hear a noise downstairs. You know that everybody who lives in your home is accounted for, meaning they're either out, and you know that because they're away for the evening, or you know that they're in their bedroom, and you start to walk down the stairs, and you in fact see a stranger in your living room. Well, at that point, you have reason to believe that there's a burglary in place of a dwelling, because I'm going to tell you a stranger in your living room in the middle of the night has entered your home with the intent of committing some kind of a crime. You certainly have reason to believe that. At that point, so long as the use of deadly physical force is reasonably necessary to defend against the burglary, you could, if you will, shoot the person. In other words, what you're not required to do at that point is you stand on the stairs and see that stranger in your living room. You don't have to say that to that person, Mr. Burglar, if you don't leave my home and leave the items behind that you're stealing, I'm going to shoot you. You don't have to do that. And one would think the reason you don't have to is it could very well be that the burglar himself or herself is armed. And notice it's reason to believe. There was a situation in Buffalo, within the past 10 years where a person was in a neighborhood and apparently had too much to drink, and he wandered into the wrong house, and he may have been confused, but the owner yelled, "Leave." He didn't leave. I don't think the owner had to yell leave, but the owner yelled leave. The person didn't leave. The owner shot him. As it turned out, he wasn't committing a burglary. He simply was drunk and confused and had entered the wrong dwelling. But clearly the owner of the home had reason to believe there was a burglary taking place, and the person was not charged with homicide. We could use the same analysis in terms of arson for the same reasons. Our last quadrant, if you will, in this table is the lower left-hand corner. And here we're looking at crimes against property, burglary, criminal mischief, and larceny. And I can give you, and in those instances, only physical force can be used. I have to tell you what happened a couple of weeks ago is at my residence, my partner has a Kia, and that's always at the head of the driveway because she works at home, and we don't have a garage, and living in an old house in the city, just don't have a garage. And my car is always at the end of the driveway because I leave each day for work, etc. And one morning, I pulled away from the driveway around 10 of 8, and I had a worker coming over to do some work on the house, and by the time he got there at 20 after 8, someone had smashed the window of the Kia and had ripped the dashboard apart, clearly in an attempt to steal the car, but they must have gotten scared off or weren't that skilled in hot wiring it. But had my partner seen this happening, though she may have been tempted, she couldn't have used her shotgun. She really has one. She couldn't have used her shotgun to shoot the person because the person, as much as there was a considerable amount of property damage, was engaged in the crime of larceny only. And again, only physical force can be used in defense of property. So that's going to conclude our screenshot videos on the defense of justification. We have a case, however, that I posted, which talks about, it's a New York case that talks about the duty of retreat. Please read that case, and it's People v. Aiken. And this will conclude this video.